Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Thomas Steininger. I welcome you to Radio Evolve, our weekly webcast for consciousness and culture. With me, again, I welcome Bence Ganti. Bence, welcome to the show.
Hello, Thomas. Thank you for inviting me and welcome to the listeners.
Bence, you are known for organizing big events. You are the founder and the main person behind the Integral European Conference that, in fact, right now, it's not just a European conference, it's a global conference. And particularly since COVID interfered with the IEC and you could not do the last one in Hungary, you also moved for the time being your conferences online. And you will have a next conference coming up, which is May 19th to 23rd. And there you have a very interesting topic. It's called a global gathering. Mm-hmm. And the topic is the future of collective evolution. When I read this, I thought, wow, that's a bold thing to do right now. Future, I'm curious what this will be about, because on one hand, everyone is talking about what will be our future, but also everyone is talking about that nobody has an idea. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the future of our collective evolution, if I may start this way, what are we talking about from your point of view? Organizing this conference, I'm sure you had a lot of conversation in this direction. You have a certain perspective that is integrally informed. And it's just something very interesting to talk about. So let's talk about what is.
Yes, it is really bold to give that title, as you say, because we are more unsure than ever, how we are going to end the pandemic and how the world will be after. And I am a conference organizer, so I personally don't have to deliver a sure answer. But I give, space, and the organizing team, we organize basically a stage where people can come, grab the mic, and share their versions and meaning making of the situation, and also dialogue around that with each other. So I think that Integral has a firm belief that there are stages of evolution. Mm-hmm. And even during this period when it's uncertain when we are going to be free again and how, we still believe on the same, stages of evolution that the integral model describes. So it's a different situation. If we wouldn't have a model, then probably we would feel more chaos. But since we have a model, a framing, and we look through that model, it's more about the question, where are we on the steps and stages of evolution, and analyzing the situation through those lenses. And here we can use different models. The basic model is Ken Wilber's integral theory, but some other friends are using spiral dynamics or Keegan, Storbert, Susan Cook-Reuters. These are main developmental models that describe the stages of evolution. So with that frame, I'm very curious where we are going to land with this conference and what we are going to come up with together in this dialogue.
One thing that we, I think, can all agree on, that we are in a global crisis, mm-hmm. in the culmination of global crisis, talking the environmental crisis, talking about the COVID crisis, talking about global social crisis. Mm-hmm. But some people also say we are in a civilizational crisis. With a civilizational crisis, the questions are getting even bigger, because civilizations are usually giving models, mm-hmm. how to respond to their framework and how to relate to the world. Mm-hmm. And our framework, which is based on European Enlightenment, European philosophy, European metaphysics and science, evolution is one foundational aspect of this. But there are a lot of questions that maybe something is going to the end right now that is bigger than what went down in the French Revolution, let's put it that way. That maybe we are experiencing the end of something, and you know that's part of my thinking is going from a global and question what is a global integral perspective, where the end of a European framework goes down, where the European understanding of modernity is maybe the first time since 500 years in question, that the European understanding of human rights is questioned by Chinese understanding of human rights. The relationship to individuality and our future, democracy and our future, has all of a sudden, not only China, but also India and other civilizations that in the last 500 years did not have a word at the table. They basically were all subsumed in our European framework. And all of a sudden, they are showing up and saying, wait a moment, we don't want to be contextualized. So there's a discussion that's bigger than maybe most of the discussion in the last 300, 500 years. Do you think that the integral model of evolution is also asked to evolve in that?
Well, it certainly can evolve. And I would gladly hear those non-European perspectives that, for example, you usually bring, or last time you brought to the online conference, voices from other cultures, which are very important, and that I see we open the gate for that. But the integral model itself, it's not just European, I think, and not just modern. It synthesizes the Eastern philosophies with the Western scientific view, and it also incorporates the spiritual states and alter states and spiritual stages to enlightenment, which are coming from the East. In the West, they are lost or partially lost at least, so they are more preserved and provided by the Eastern meditation teachers and traditions. So the integral model itself is postmodern. We even call it postmodern. So the reflection of modernity with its critics and coming up with new solutions is postmodernity. And the reflection on postmodernity, criticizing that and coming up with even newer solutions would be the postmodern, which is integral. But I'm really curious if there is any viable new model from other cultures. I don't think that the European or American culture is better or worse, but I would maintain that we shouldn't just have a green heart. The green is the postmodern, open-hearted approach where we want to deconstruct structures and hierarchies, and nobody is more evolved and less evolved, and everybody has the right to say an equal right. But with that can also come a certain blindness. For example, I wouldn't want a traditionalist, impose on me something that is already transcended by modern or postmodern values. See what I mean? So I don't want to be, let's say, a rigid traditionalism imported back while we already came out of that. So I certainly would be very open as an integralist from any culture to any opinion, but then it has to be really fresh, and evolutionary new. And if it is, then it doesn't matter which culture it comes from in a global conversation. You see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this Chinese philosopher Zhao Tingyang, I think he's pronounced. He just wrote a book. It's called in English Under the Heaven, or under the Heaven, and it is a book that really changes European culture from a Chinese perspective. And it's not only just a Chinese philosopher, a contemporary one, quite a young one. He is basically, that's what the rumor is, he's very wide read in the Chinese elite right now. And he is proposing a different concept of world peace and world culture from a, in the end, very Confucian-inspired concept of the relationship of the individual and the collective, and criticizing a lot of concepts of European enlightenment as being in itself something hyper-individuated and dominance-oriented. And he has his whole angle. He read his Kant, he read his European philosophers. He's kind of a modern philosopher in that sense. And he's one maybe of the first who is really trying from a Chinese perspective to challenge our understanding what it means to be modern or postmodern, and saying the European Enlightenment maybe got it really wrong. And I think it's also questionable what he's bringing, because it fits very much also in a communist dominance role, and it's also not very about liberal freedom, let's put it that way. But there are questions that they are rising that put into question is our understanding of the development of individuality. And we hear this from different cultures, where we think our development of individuality, which is the pride of European culture, that we created, individuation. And this is what progress is about. And they say, you miss it. What you're creating is a monster that is not capable of living. Now the Chinese thinking comes in harmony. And I'm not saying that he is having the right answer to that, but it's at least interesting to have a conversation with a contemporary philosopher coming from a Chinese, in the end, Confucian background, with a different development of philosophy, who is kind of questioning a lot of concepts, and a lot of concepts that our concept of evolution, also individual evolution, is based on. And it's fair enough. China will play an important role in the future, maybe the dominant role in the future, we don't know. So we have to have the discussion, and we also have the discussion, how do we see this from an integral point of view, and how do we understand approaches like this?
Yes, and the question is, what is he proposing? So he is criticizing or deconstructing modernity as being over-individualistic monster, but what is his solution? What is he proposing? So that maybe would tell what stage is he talking about. Is he bringing some postmodern thing, or is he want us to go back to some absolutistic order, or purple tribal unity, or what's the proposal there?
The proposal, as far as I understand, I haven't read him enough to be able to answer for him, is that he's questioning one of the building blocks of our understanding, which is the separate individual. And that separate individual as such does not exist. It always exists in relationship. And it's the real building block is our relationships that even the individual has to be based on. And the way we think it in our modern thinking is the wrong way around, because we create something separate that does not exist in this absolute way as we think individuation is about, and all of our problems are also linked to this. So that's part. Then you can, of course, put it in our framework and ask, so where is this? But he's in that sense also questioning the frameworks, and they say they are built on these concepts already. Let's talk about fundamentals of this framework, like our idea of, in his point of view, an absolutist individualism, where the individual is something that you can treat as a substance that exists in a nearly absolute way as an individual. And you could say that at least a lot of modern philosophers go in this direction. So this is interesting. I don't know where to go. I'm not enough of a philosopher to have answers, but I find that if you talk about where our collective futures go, I think this is part of the discussion that is interesting, also because it's a conversation between two different civilizations that play on the world order right now.
Yes, just the discussion itself is very chilling, I think, and exciting.
Yeah.
on the other hand, I need to remind you that that we Western postmodernists have the same critic towards ourselves as modernists that you mentioned by these Chinese. So postmodernity is precisely built on the notion that we Westerners regard ourselves as too individualistic, too alienated, too materialistic. It's wrong, it's false, it's too much. So we need to connect again. We need to, the connection and relational practices and relating is emphasized and greatly and deeply emphasized, and communal nature is emphasized in postmodernity. You know, it has been going for 60 years in the West, postmodernity, the criticism of individualistic modernity. So from an integral perspective, we might frame it as a green approach, probably, or as maybe a very unique approach that combines green elements with blue elements. I don't know where is he going with it, so I can't exactly see. But
I'm pretty sure, from an integral point of view, I'm pretty sure there are big blue elements in this.
Yes, yes. So, but maybe an interesting combination of blue and green, you know, which is, and that's a point that I'm gladly, you know, bringing in and joining your enthusiasm about multicultural dialogue. That even within Europe there is a difference between the Hungarian composition of the self and the German composition of the self. When I say composition, I mean to which extent which level is present and lived and exercised by the culture. And an American, you know, is different. So I'm a therapist one-on-one, but also I lead a lot of groups. And my focus is transforming the personality from an integral perspective, or integrally transforming the personality. That means that, you know, Hungarians have more blue in their composition, less orange, but a lot of green, you know, compared to a German. German have probably more orange, solid blue, and a lot of green, you know. And but even between Hungarian, so I led workshops there in Germany and in Hungary and in the US, and simply the people who are sitting in my workshops are not the same people, you know. And my exercises doesn't work the same way, and there are differences even within the Western cultures. And that's exciting. That basically taught me, from the experience I learned, that there is no one integral approach on planet Earth. Maybe one model, there is one model that's described. How people feel it, understand it, and exercise it is different. In Hungary, I need to teach my student not only how to get from orange to green and green to yellow or teal, but I also have to teach them how to be good orange and let go of fears from blue, you know, and exercise more of freedom of speech, while we are also opening up the green self and trying to go to the integrated yellow self. So for me, working with people through cultures, it's kind of detecting which stages are over or under represented and practiced, and making adjustments that this scale of development or the spiral is functioning healthy. You see what I mean?
No, I very much agree. And if you don't mind, because also we cannot solve this intercultural dialogue in this conversation that we're having. I just want to bring it up because I'm sure that it will be part of the conversation, at least when we talk about a global collective evolution. It has to be part of the conversation, because otherwise it's just not global.
Yes.
But for our conversation right now, if you're okay with it, I would leave it like this and go in a different direction that I also find very interesting. At least I'm curious where the conference, as you know it, will go.
Okay.
Because part of our collective evolution is also that we are in a complete revolution of our media reality. Let's put it that way. We are amongst the many things that we are in, with the invention of the social internet, the breakdown of the big media companies and their capacity to structure the global discourse, and all of a sudden having a playing field for, on one hand, every player, and on the other hand, also a new capacity for algorithmic manipulation of all of that. A complete turnaround of how our public discourse works in a way that we're in the beginning of it, we try to figure it out. Nobody really has a real sense of what's happening here. The way I think about it, it is the same or even more than what the printing press did in the 15th century to destroy the medieval Europe, the dominance of the church. Basically, truth until the printing press was very easy. It was held in the monasteries. It was held in the handwritten Bible. And the church, who had the capacity to organize all of that. And then all of a sudden, you had Gutenberg inventing the printing press. He gave every peasant in Europe a Bible in their hand, in their own language, and chaos broke out. And literally chaos broke out. You had the 30 Years' War. First you had the Peasant Wars, then you had the 30 Years' War. You had an unbelievable, stressful time, maybe some parallels to what we are having right now, until slowly we reconfigured and modernity built itself with a public sphere organized about first printing press, media, book distribution. So we reinvented us. And what one of the big breaking points was the invention of the printing press. And it seems that the internet, and particularly the social internet, is doing something comparable right now. And we have no idea where we are going with it. We also know that a lot of not so great things are happening with it. A lot of craziness is kind of happening at the same time. Do you think that Integral has something to say about this? Is there something from an Integral perspective that approaches this very crucial situation that we're in our collective evolution?
I don't know if Integral in general has to say,
but
I personally probably have something to say that I have contemplated, that I think that, in Integral, we talk about the psychic stage, when we read each other's mind or intuitively know what's going on in the other, which happens often between people who love each other. I think that love is the carrier of telepathy. And all these phenomena, telepathy, sensing into the other, just intuitively, directly knowing what is in a situation, bypassing the rational mind, that's we call the psychic state of mind. And we believe that that mode of functioning is inherent in every person, though it's often dormant and unused. Even in atheist people who don't believe in it, it's there as a plugin, just not yet an unzipped plugin in the system. So everybody could use it. And we believe that after, postmodernity will come an era, an age where these spiritual capacities will be used. And my personal opinion, that in order to get that collectively, first we have to believe it from experience. We have to have enough experience that we can almost magically communicate. And I think the technological era where all of us, maybe not all, but most of us are connected online. You just call me, you see me, in your iPhone. It's already almost like a miracle, isn't it? And it's just one step from dropping my iPhone and concentrating on you and maybe telepathically, sending messages. You see what I mean? So I think that this is not just a chaos, but a very creative unfolding and opening to an even further era. And in the 60s and 70s, we were believing that this new world, the new age, will come by 2020 or 2012, very soon. And then I think that was a premature, idealistic, early postmodernism.
Mm-hmm.
No, it goes way slower. We are not yet there. Maybe we need a couple of hundreds of centuries, but I still believe that that is the direction. Just in between modernity and the psychic, refined human planetary world, there is the intermittent stages that we are now experiencing. And I think what's happening in technology can be seen as an unfolding of that. And if you let me share an example, very interesting example, I have been on vacation, just returned back last week. I've been to Tanzania and met the Maasai, the Maasai tribal people. And I met a boy who is 23. His name is Joshua. Maasai. Some Maasais took Christianity, but they still live in the bushes, the full traditional lifestyle. And Joshua had an iPhone. The Maasai comes with the Maasai dress and stick and the sword and very traditional life. It's a purple society, a very good purple society. We would be very glad to have half of what they have, relational and community-wise. It's so good. And he has the iPhone. And the way we communicated when we were not physically together is WhatsApp. So there I'm WhatsApping with the Maasai from the bush. and then when we met, he showed me functions on the iPhone that I even didn't know. So the Maasai was teaching me how to use my iPhone. And this is fantastic for me. This is just a miracle, how the different eras and stages of evolution are together in one.
No, I agree.
It's a liberating perspective, experience.
No, it's definitely is. I would like to put aside, mention a side that is also troublesome. Let's put it that way.
Yes, might be, but who knows?
Absolutely. Who knows? But just
that's what we think that is troublesome. But maybe evolution and the whole unfolding is more creative than we know.
In the end, I'm sure this is the case. But what I would bring in that what is happening right now, even particularly when we talk about evolution from mythic states to rational states to postmodern stage, and when we see the kind of consciousness that is building around the internet, and phenomenons like QAnon, which seem to be neo-mythic dark cults that have enormous psychic power, where it seems out of different factors, for example, because of the flooding of information, it's getting more and more difficult to kind of create discrimination of rational truth and fake truth. Let's put it that way. And in that kind of old mythic structures create something. When you look at QAnon, the psychic power of QAnon is in this way, not so good sense, a shamanic power of psychic darkness that is creating myths that we had similar in medieval ages, that kind of look in some way very regressive. And it seems that because of what you're saying, that we get all the information all at the same time, it's very hard to discriminate. It's also not that it's through reading books, it's having heavily through simultaneously influx of thousands of images at the same time. There are new forms how our collective psyche is structuring that does not seem always to be very it can be scary, let's put it that way. At the same time, I have no doubt that that evolution will work its way through this somehow. But it's also important to understand what is going on here, because the public discourse is changing dramatically because of these different mechanisms. Is this, in your sense, a regression of consciousness, or what is going on in that sense? If you even share that, what I'm sharing.
I think we are just experiencing that if we give an open megaphone to everybody on earth, then simply we will hear louder what there is anyway. So, and probably that's the learning curve, to learn what to do with it and how to handle it.
Yeah.
And for example, this Maasai boy Joshua used his iPhone and WhatsApp basically to maintain his purple world. He didn't want to change that world. And all the Maasai were connected. And if one has a problem, in 15 minutes, 10 Maasai is coming there and helps him. And if he's run out of something, they will give him food. There is no homeless Maasai. There is no Maasai without house, because simply they don't allow it to happen. And that's when purple is still working and intact. That's what we would do from our hearts, Western people, but we don't do it because we think, oh, it's the problem of that person. It's you see what I mean? So he is using his iPhone to maintain his cultural, world. And the QAnon people are using the internet to maintain that, that world, unfortunately. And the business people with wood, orange are using the internet for that. So I think what we have now is an unregulated wild west of all stages with a megaphone online.
Interesting, because there I have a slightly different take on it.
Okay.
And the slightly different take that I have talking about QAnon, it doesn't seem to me that people, let's talk in this language of purple, and in that sense, not healthy purple. That's not just
healthy purple. No, that's kind of torso.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to me that basically it's just giving a megaphone to people who already have been unhealthy purple in that sense. But it seems the people that had more rational, more modern perspectives get pulled into something that is a retro purple by the power of this, let's call it, online cult.
I see.
So it's not just that things that already were there, they also, through these new mechanisms, they're recreated in a new way, and they get their own collective strength. All of a sudden, this QAnon through the internet becomes a major political force, even storming the Capitol in the most powerful nation of the world. So that's not nothing.
Yes, I hear you. It's not just megaphone. Usual people with megaphone, but something extra is created.
Yeah.
Right?
So
I agree with that.
So what I think, and that basically these new ways how we share our consciousness together, these completely new ways, also change the dynamics of our consciousness. And sometimes the dynamic is more driven by non-rational capacities. And we have to find, if you talk in a modernist European context, we have to find ways to make a rational or trans-rational capacity to hold all of these mechanisms. Like also culturally, you can see how the evolution of culture in Europe from paganism to Christianity was something where all these forces of spirits were brought into a new framework that brought something, however positive or negative you look at it, but it created something that was able to hold higher and more structured forms of order. If you see negative or positive, if this is evolution or not, but it happened, and it created something like the medieval civilization. Is there something where we also see that our collective evolution needs a new way of understanding this dynamics? And is there something where integral has to play a role in this?
I want to quote Ken Wilber because I agree with him on this. When he was asked, how to do an integral world governance, or is there a need, or would there be a need for integral world governance? And he said, yes, basically an ideal scenario would be to have an integral stage world governance where those who govern, and obviously it's not one person, but would be, you know, a group of whatever board, you know, would understand the stages and allow its healthy forms, even promote probably, you know, its healthy forms in those areas where it's unpracticed. For example, we need more healthy purple, us alienated modern people, you know, we could learn from the Maasai some things, but we definitely don't need the shadow purple, shadow red, or the shadows of any stages. So it would be a highly sophisticated stage of human evolution where such psychological, social, interior factors would be as part of the governance as the external factors, because now all the governments are all about external factors: money, profit, laws, you know, lower right quadrant, as we call it in integral. But what I would want to see in the world, that psychological factors are also, you know, brought into the table of law and order. For example, you couldn't play big games with your loved ones. You are free to play any kind of harming games, and if it gets extreme and to the category of criminal, like child abuse, raping, then it gets attention, and the law starts to deal with it. You see what I mean? But if it's not super pathological, super criminal, just ordinary people playing games and torturing each other psychologically, that's okay. Nobody cares, you know. So I would welcome a world where, no, we do care. We want to refine the world. We want a much higher world. It's in us. It's just not yet exercised, you know, from governance. So an ideal integral stage world would be governed from there. And yes, there would be limitations, and there would be a police, because there would be still, you know, shadow of people that need to be stopped. But basically the shadow elements of different stages would be diminished or minimalized. So now we are in a stage where it's not yet part of governance, but we already know about it and understand it, because we have psychology, you know, psychotherapy, social sciences, and I see no other way in the future than bringing this inner knowledge that we already have for 100 years in the West to the governance. And and that would be an ideal scenario for a global world.
Yeah, that would open a whole different topic, how the European experience plays a part, how to envision the future, the post-national governance that the European continent at least is an experiment field of, maybe not the most successful, but
yes,
but
and let's see that European individualism is at one hand, we can criticize it that it's over or too much exercised, etc. But European culture is the only culture, and not just European, but the Western culture, the modern culture, wherever it is on earth, but wherever there is modernity, that's the only place where you can start to tell truth. You know, in a traditional world, I cannot express my feelings freely, because I will be judged by the traditional framework. It's not aligned with Dhamma, it's not aligned with the Quran, it's not aligned with Christianity, it's not aligned with the absolutistic order dogma. So I shut up, I ask forgiveness from God that I had that thought, you know, and that's mere repression that Freud started to liberate people of, you know. So basically it is the Western culture where not only the exterior freedom of the individual was formed, but also the interior freedom of speech and of feeling and of having whatever experience and expressing that honestly. So I think that's a huge, huge attainment, evolutionary attainment, that we should never give up and never regress in a stage where you are silenced and asked to repress yourself and give yourself up for the collective. Rather, we should go forward where you maintain your individual subjective experience, but connected with others nicely and hard-based, much more deeply than modernity allows us.
Yes, we are also coming to the end of our time here.
Oh.
There's many things I would like to ask you, but obviously only some can be asked. And of course, a lot of this will be part of the IEC online gathering.
Yes.
May 19th to the 23rd. What kind of conversations do you expect to be there about this topic?
Well, as we have now around 130 presenters who applied with a vast array of colorful topics, there's going to be a lot, in a lot of areas of conversations. There will be integral politics, a little more emphasized. Mm-hmm. There will be a lot of presentation and even online processes around relationships, spiritual experiences, and shadow work that we mentioned. There will be some people bringing technology, exactly pointing to these questions that you raised. And of course, a central subject would be how people see what is going on with COVID and where are we heading. Mm-hmm. Are we going into a more controlled world with less freedom, or we are going to a transformed world with more freedom, actually, or are we just going back to where we were 2 years ago? So
a whole topic that we haven't even touched in our conversation.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Some names you're aware of, or people should be aware that they're coming?
Yes, of course, Ken Wilber, the founder of integral theory, would be one of our keynotes. Charles Eisenstein is coming, who is proposing, a new approach to sacred economics, a new approach to economics, trying to elevate into a sacred level. And Dr. Gabor Mate, who is a very well-known researcher on trauma and addiction. And Mark Foreman and Keith Witt, they are two integral psychotherapists who hasn't yet been to IECs. So I'm very glad that finally they join. And there are some people from business and investment, like Mariana Bozesan, the president of Aqua Foundation, dealing with international investments with a consciousness of, love and postmodern values and integral values. And some people will come from other cultures. One person who is very interesting is Dr. Khalid El-Sherbini from Egypt, who is an Egyptian offering integral enneagram and trainings for individuals and companies and coaching in such a diverse culture like Egypt. So he's bringing in Middle Eastern and Egyptian, a little bit African perspective. And Paddy Palis and Rika are also coming from South Africa. So Africa will be represented. And Asians from India, from Japan, from China are also coming to present. So I could go on with names. As I said, we are more than 20, just from the top of the mind a few.
As you won't be able to name all the names, I think it's also good to name the name of the website. It's integraleuropeanconference.com in one word, where you not only find all the information, but also you can directly sign up.
Exactly, and join us.
Bence, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you, Thomas, for inviting me. And I hope that the listeners enjoyed it.
I hope so too.